Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's doing all right tonight. I'm excited to bring to you tonight. We're going to talk about retirement and are you ready? So let's dive in. But before we do that, I want to bring back our treasure target here for a second. Let me pull this screen up here. All right. Just to remind everybody what we had talked about a little while back. The treasure target, of course, on the outside here, God owns it all. We went through a couple different areas: live, give, owe, and grow. We're still working our way through all these different categories, but today we're going to talk a little bit more about the grow part here. We talked about maintaining margin, which is having margin between what's going in and what's coming out. And today we talked about living expenses. We talked about save for emergencies. We're going to start this little inner circle here, save for God-given goals, which is pretty broad. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on that section. I'm sure everybody wants to grow their money and get ready for whatever it is you're saving up for, and or get ready for retirement. So we're going to focus in here, and obviously all these work together to get to that experience, financial freedom, right into the center of that target. So guys, I'm excited today to drop in and start talking about retirement. If you've missed any of the previous videos, they're all out on the Facebook group. You can find them out in the feed. If you don't find them there, you can certainly go to the YouTube channel, and you can find them out there as well. They're all posted. I've been posting some shorts and things like that onto the channel, and there's the URL to the YouTube channel as well. You can find everything there as well. All right, so let's dive in. Retirement, are you ready? All right, big billboard ahead, decisions ahead, choose your path wisely. There's a lot to retirement planning, and more than just having a retirement number. There's a lot more to that. So what we're going to go through tonight is some of the basics, kind of an overview, kind of introduction to everything, some of the different components. And then in coming sessions in broadcast, we're going to go through more in depth each one of these, right? So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I love helping people out with retirement and making sure people can retire happy, right? You don't want to work your whole life and not be able to enjoy your retirement. So no matter what age you are, there's actions and planning that can happen. Of course, the younger you start, the better off you are, the less stress it is, the easier it is. You don't have to put away as much each month. But if you do put more away each month, obviously that's going to lead to bigger gains. So let's just go through a couple things here real quick, right? So I wanted to show you some stats before we dive in. So according to Yahoo Finance, about 64% of people are delaying retirement, mainly because they're not ready, or they haven't planned, or an array of different circumstances. And from that, 64% of those rather will retire broke. And that's one reason I love doing what I'm doing, is the poverty level for retirees just way too high here in the United States. A lot of it's just due to lack of planning and being educated and starting earlier. But even if you haven't started earlier, there's things you can do to help you get on track and mitigate that, right? And then it's predicted another 19% will retire with less than $10,000. Well, as you know, $10,000 isn't going to get you very far, and that doesn't paint a really good picture for retirement in the United States. And then in a recent survey that was done, 78% of respondents report they will have to continue working past their full retirement age, or FRA. Right now, that full retirement age is 67, but there are still some people out there that are blending into what used to be 65, and we'll see what happens if that changes, in the coming years. One thing I want you to remember is the only one who can help your older self is your younger self. What does that talk to? It talks about planning. We talked about, even from a core financial standpoint, is biblically we're supposed to be planning as well, right? And the only way you can do that and ensure is you got to start that plan, right? And so you can live that happily ever after retirement. So let's talk a little bit from that survey. Let's talk a little bit about this, just to show you some stats. If you're on this video and you're watching, then you're getting, you're starting to have a step ahead. You're on that road to buck the trend. You just got to follow through. So out of that survey that happened, why do you anticipate needing to continue work past the age of 65? 78%, I won't have enough to save to retire comfortably. Either that's they don't have enough to pay their core expenses, or they think they're going to run out of money. If you're running out of money, 56%, I don't feel like Social Security will take care of my needs. We're going to talk a lot more about Social Security later on. We're going to touch on it here tonight, but we're going to go deeper into that in another session about Social Security. 49% said I'm concerned about rising cost of healthcare. 17% said I had an unexpected situation or rise that cut into my retirement savings. You hear that often, but we got to plan for that. Plan for the unexpected so you can invest in the future, right? 12% said I'm taking care of a relative or friend and require more income. Just like a lot of times your kids may come home, but later on in life, you can end up taking care of your elderly parents as well. And that could take a chunk in to kind of affect back up to number 17 there as well. And under that 12% is kind of subcategories here. Financial troubles, have no money, poor economy, increased cost of living. We're certainly experiencing that now with the inflation rates that have come out. And when we're doing planning, you have to account for inflation properly. Today's dollar is not worth the same what tomorrow's dollar is going to be. It's going to cost you a lot more in the future, so you got to factor that in. And then to receive full maximum Social Security benefits, retirement age is older than 65. So that's true, because now the current one is up to 67. And we're going to talk about Social Security, but there's ways to optimize that. Okay. So it's just some concerning stats there. And my job is to help you be more prepared for it. Right. All right. So let's look at a few more stats. So how much money do Americans have they saved for retirement? This was updated back in 2019. But it hasn't changed much. So I just left the same slide in here. So of the respondents, 45% said zero. They haven't saved anything. 18% said less than 10,000. That's a staggering amount, right? Combine those two together. That's a huge amount of people that have nothing or less than $10,000. We all know that's not going to get you very far. And unfortunately, these days as well, Social Security is not enough to sustain you through retirement. And then you can see down throughout the grid here, 10 to 50,000, 12%. Go all the way down, 100,000 to 500,000, only 12%, and 500,000 or more, 3.9%. We'll talk a lot more about what that goal or that retirement number should look like. Obviously, it's going to be different for each person, but we're going to talk about what factors go into that, and because you want to have a customized plan to fit your needs, and we'll obviously go into that as well. All right. Want to be crystal clear, retirement planning today is not the same as it was for your parents or your grandparents, especially your grandparents. They don't have, we don't have pensions like we used to. There's only like 5% of companies that even offer pensions. A lot of those have been dissolved. The payouts are a lot less. Between Social Security and pensions, people were set. They didn't have to worry about them. The retirement planning was very simple. Well, nowadays it's more on you and different ways to go about saving for retirement. Right. So it's a lot different. So you can't model what your parents or grandparents did for today. It's a lot different. 7 basic steps. So we're going to, throughout our different course here and in future videos, we're going to go through each of these. So you got to have a plan first. That's going to lay it out. And then from that plan, we're going to factor in all these other things down here that I've listed here. Maximize Social Security benefits. We'll talk about how to optimize that. Consider a hybrid retirement. I'll tell you what that means. Protect savings from inflation, secure guaranteed retirement income, plan for long-term medical costs, which a lot of people forget about. And you can use your home equity wisely if your mortgage is paid off. We'll dive into that, what that means. And it's changed a lot over the last couple of years, and some cool things you can do there. Okay. All right. So let's dive in a little bit further. So we're going to start talking about what makes up the beginnings of your retirement plan. You hear a lot of people out there talk about what's your retirement number. You might hear commercials on TV or things on the web. What's your retirement number? Well, it's just not quite simply as just having a retirement number. Sure, that's part of it. We got to figure out how much you need to save with the future cost of money, inflation and whatnot. And we got to figure that out. We got to come to a number, but it's a little more complicated, right? Have your base number, but there's 3 buckets to that, right? And you're going to hear me talk about 3 different buckets in multiple contexts. And I'm going to explain all this to you, and it'll be a lot clearer as we go through. But also, it's just not about how much you save up, right? That's the accumulation phase. How do I get to that number? And of course, that journey up is how you get there. We're going to talk about that. But it's also the disbursement phase. You got to have a disbursement phase plan. You just can't freely spend money. You got to be able to pull it out of the right proper vehicles, investment vehicles at the right time. And it goes back to budgeting. You have to have a budget, obviously, to start with. But it can make a huge difference of how fast you pull that money out and what investments you pull them out of, where you can find yourself running out of money faster than you anticipated, right? So let's start with the core expenses. This was something out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics back in 2020. Average 65-year-old, just to give you an idea, housing 37%, transportation 13, healthcare 14, entertainment 5, other 19, and food 12. Now, obviously, that can vary greatly between people and couples. We're going to talk a lot more about expenses here in a minute. I'm going to show you a few things as we dive in, but just to kind of give you a base chart. That's a national average with expenses at age 65. So that may look different than what you're doing today, and that's one thing you have to factor in as well. And part of a pure holistic planning, we would factor in and try to predict what those expenses are going to look like. Typically, 70 to 75%, some people go as high as 80 of what you're currently bringing in income is in your expenses. That's what you plan for in retirement. But I like to do it a little more detailed to dial it in a little bit more precise. Also, you notice housing is 37%. That's a big chunk. So as we talked about paying down debt, obviously we've talked about credit cards and all that first. If you can get your mortgage paid down by the time you retire, it can have huge benefits. You take out that 37%, that enables a lot more freedom in your budget to do other things. Makes a little more cushion there, but it also allows you to do some things we'll talk about later with equity in your home. Okay. All right. So what are you saving for in retirement? You're going to see a couple different pyramids here. There's a hierarchy spreadsheet, worksheet that I use. And let's kind of go through this. So I talked about 3 different categories. Later on, we're going to talk about investment vehicles and 3 different buckets that you're going to put them into and how those buckets work. But there's another set of 3s, needs, wants, and wishes, that we go into while we're planning, right? So the core base down there is needs, expense for my needs in retirement. Well, what is that? Mortgage, utilities, groceries, to pay your base core expenses. That's your needs, right? That is your needs. Our first goal is to cover your core needs to live, right? And from there, we're going to go up to wants, expenses for more comfortable retirement. What's comfortable retirement mean? Well, that's different for everybody, but maybe you want to do a little bit of traveling. You want to go on some trips. You want to, play some golf, whatever it may be, go out with your friends, whatever that means to you. Maybe once is, having a vacation home, it could mean different things to different people. So that's the next category, wants. We could have our cost of living or a lifestyle a little bit more increased, right? Living a little more comfortably in retirement, enjoying it a little bit more. And then the wishes up top, expenses for my wishes in retirement. That's the third category, the wishes. Well, if I'm going to go all out, and if am I dreaming, what's going to really make me happy in retirement, what are those wishes, right? Maybe it's just not a simple trip to the beach. Maybe it's a trip around the world. Whatever that means to you. When we sit down, we're going to figure out what those 3 different things mean, right? And anybody that's working with you, they should go through those different categories, because you're going to have to fund each of those categories in a separate way, right? You want to account for each of those. It's going to make a difference how we plan and how we work our way up the chain as far as what investments we're going to put them into. So if you look over to the right side, protected lifetime income, we want to have your needs and a little bit of your wants in protected income. We're going to talk a lot more about that in other sessions, but there's different vehicles to put you in that's going to have some protected lifetime income. Think of it as your paycheck in retirement. There's ways to structure your plan to have protected lifetime income to cover these expenses, so you don't have to worry about your core expenses. You don't have to be living in poverty. We're wondering about how you're going to pay your bills. You can't. My whole thing is about retire happy, right? You're going to hear me say that a lot, retire happy. You can't retire happy without your core fundamentals being covered, right? So that's the baseline, is being able to cover your core. Then you move up the chain is probable income. We're going to fund that a little bit differently. That funds pop into your wants, into your wishes. You're going to be a little more aggressive with some of your investment vehicles and how we do that, right? And of course, this is all going to be based off of your risk tolerance, right? We're going to want to factor in. We don't want you stressed out over the different vehicles of investment that you're in. So great little pyramid, how to think about this: needs, wants, and wishes. Break it into 3 categories. You're going to hear 3 sets of 3, like the number 3s: needs, wants, and wishes. You're going to hear buckets. You're going to hear one other thing about phases, all in 3s. Keeps it simple. All right, let's continue on here. So retirement peak, I talked about the accumulation phase and the disbursement phase. So this is critical in planning, right? And you got to think about how you're going up that mountain to the peak and how you're coming down that mountain. So grow. The purpose is to accumulate wealth, and and primarily your risk there is just market volatility. Now we want to control that as you're going up the mountain, right? You want to make sure you have a rope, but you can be a little more risky, a little more risk tolerant down in this phase, especially when you're down toward the bottom of that mountain, right? But we want to do a risk tolerance with you. So you got to determine really what your risk level is. Are you conservative? Are you moderate? Are you risky? Are you all out? What is that? What is it? What does that mean? We're going to come up with a personalized range of return in order to go up to hit that peak. That peak is going to be what that goal number is going to be. But then take a notice here, danger zone up at the top. Well, it gets kind of thin up there at the top, right? The air gets kind of thin. You put the oxygen tank on. So we're going to protect, right? This is the pre-retirement years. The purpose is still to grow your money. You're still going up the mountain, right? But you got to prevent catastrophic loss. You got to prevent things happening to your nest egg. So we start shifting the funds, the investments, the allocations that are there. We start shifting things a little bit. There's a thing called sequence of returns risk, and that is huge for retirement planning. Within the first 1 to 3 years of going into retirement, if you take a huge hit on your portfolio before then, going into retirement, you're not going to be able to recover because you're at the peak. You're going to start going down. You have no more room to go up. You're running out of runway. So if you take a hit on downturns in markets, or big hits in your investment portfolio, 1 to 3 years leading up to the top, it's going to be terrible. Also, the first 5 years, sometimes even longer, on the downturn on your disbursement phase. Sequence returns risk is huge. There's some models I can show you. There's some calculations I'll show you later on in another session where if you take that, say you take a 20% drop, what the market's done here recently in the last year or two, if you take a 20% hit downturn on your portfolio, if you take that at the beginning of your retirement versus taking it at the end, the numbers are astonishing of what that looks like. You're going to run out of money. You're going to have a lot less money at the end if you take that hit up front than you do at the bottom. Because if you take it at the bottom, while you're still dispersing, your funds are still in accounts. You're still making money off those investments. Now, granted, it's a little more conservative, but you're still making money. You still can make up some room. You're still compounding interest. You're still making yield on those investments, right? I'll show you some grids of that when we get to that section in coming weeks, right? So it's critical that we take care of the sequence of returns risk. Some other things up there. We're going to recreate your paycheck. Well, we got to figure that out what that is up top, figuring out what your expenses in. We're going to factor in Social Security. There is ways to maximize Social Security, right? I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Account for risk, account for taxes, healthcare, and leaving a legacy. Those are all part of the disbursement phase that you got to account for each of those sections. We would account for that in your plan and what that means. All right. So like I talked about, Social Security optimization. Most people think, well, I'm just going to file for Social Security and that's all there is. It's a little more complicated than that, and it's not saying that to scare people. But the Social Security Administration, they cannot give you advice. All they can do is take your application, pardon me, and have you file the claim for Social Security benefits. They're not even allowed to give you advice. It's against their policies to give any advice. So you got to figure that out on your own. But unfortunately, there's some resources out there to help you out. I can certainly help you out with that as well. But they're not allowed to do that. There are tons of different rules about Social Security, but there's certainly ways to optimize Social Security and build it properly into your plan. Some of it is just timing of when you file. And if you want to wait till you're later to file, not like at 65 or 67, you want to wait till 70 and maximize those benefits. There's ways to build an investment Social Security bridge to cover that time frame. We're going to talk a lot more about that as we get into more detailed into planning. Okay, so Social Security certainly becomes a factor in it. We'll talk about it as well. We'll touch on. I know a lot of people worried about Social Security and it potentially ending. I don't really believe that. Maybe the benefits will be reduced a little bit. They may tweak how money goes in, but it's going to be there. I won't worry about that too much. I want to drive home this too. Success of your retirement is not really about assets. In your parents' age and grandparents' age, that used to be a really cornerstone retirement planning is, well, what's your assets? Or a lot of people think about that. What's my total net worth? What's my, what assets do I have that equal up to net worth? Well, it's not about your assets, right? Assets are physical things. Sure, assets are also money, but assets can be lost, stolen, swindled, divorced, decimated in market crashes. All that can happen to your assets, right? The success of your retirement, you can't think about it in assets. You got to think about it as income, retirement income. How am I paying for this? How am I distributing it on that downturn? You're starting to get the picture here a little bit. While you're going to work your butt off to get up the hill to get to that goal, you got to figure out what that downhill walk journey looks like. How are you recreating your paycheck? How's that? How you're creating your own retirement paycheck, right? It's about income. Well, even your accumulation is about income, because you got to figure out how much you got to accumulate to make that income work. A lot of different ways to do that. We'll get into that in some future sessions. So talked about guaranteed lifetime income to cover those core expenses and a little bit of those wants, right? Why do you need secure guaranteed lifetime income, right? To help that ongoing paycheck. There's multiple ways to provide a guaranteed lifetime paycheck. There's several different investment vehicles to accomplish that. Usually you want to use a combination of several of them. There's several different things, because you want to diversify into different type of investments. We're not going to put it all in one type of vehicle. So there's several different ways to do that. And the reason you want to have guaranteed lifetime income, here are some of the key risk factors in retirement that we want to account for in your retirement plan, and why we're going to have secured guaranteed lifetime income. Longevity risk. Well, people are living longer than they used to, right? Your money has to last longer. You need to have that guaranteed income. Deflation risk, market risk. Let's talk about market risk for a second. 20% downturn or plus, in the last couple of years. You got sequence of returns risk that we just touched on. You got to factor that in. You got to account for it. Withdrawal rate risk. You may have heard the 4% rule of, hey, just take 4% a year out of your retirement accounts, and that model will suffice. That used to be a pretty good model. It was generated many, many decades ago. But that's starting to need to be tweaked a little bit for a lot of reasons, because of market volatility, because of inflation, and the different type of vehicles that are out there for investments. It's not necessarily a hard and fast rule. We've got to go a little more deeper than that. Sequence returns risk that I just talked about. Long-term care. Have you factored in long-term care? Whether that's at-home care, whether that's nursing homes, whatever that may be, there's ways to cover that with insurance, or you can build that into your nest egg to have enough money to take care of it. Nursing homes are really expensive. So you got to factor in long-term care. That can decimate a retirement plan. Mortality risk, obviously death. If you die earlier and your spouse is still living, is your plan, does it account for that? Inflation risk we talked about, especially these days with inflation being as high as it is. Regulatory risk, things could change, whether it's changing Social Security. We just had the Secure Act 2.0 got released, and I'm going to talk about that in some videos future as well. It changes, what that did is it changes how you can disperse money out of your IRAs. It changes when you can do that. And more importantly, it changes your RMDs, the required minimum distributions. We're going to talk a lot about that. RMDs, required minimum distributions. The government makes you take disbursements out of your retirement accounts at a certain age. And if you don't, and you don't take the right amount out, and there's calculations online that show you that, but if you don't start taking them at the right age, if you don't take them every year, you get penalized, right? You got to factor that in. And then taxation risk. Are you taking money out of your retirement accounts, the right ones at the right time? Are they tax deferred accounts? Are they tax-free accounts? Are they full taxed accounts? Another big hit that most people don't think about is your Social Security benefits can be taxed. There's a calculation for your provisional income. If your provisional income is within a certain range, and the provisional, so if you're still working part-time, and or money that's coming out of your retirement accounts, you take that, your adjusted gross taxable income, plus any interest you're earning on accounts, plus half of your Social Security benefits count toward provisional income. And if you, depending on whether you're filing joint or individual, your Social Security taxes can be taxed at zero, meaning you don't have to pay any taxes, or either 50% or 85%. I'll let you in on the secret on that in a future video of exactly what those thresholds are and how to avoid that. So as you can see, there's a little bit more to Social Security than you might have thought. The taxation aspect, the timing aspect, building that Social Security bridge and optimizing. There's a lot more to it. So we'll have a session on Social Security. All right, so there's some of the risks. Yeah, that's down in step 5 in the steps, but highly, highly important. Here's here's some things that I'm going to throw a lot of quotes at you here over the course of while we're talking about retirement and whatnot. So you're not hearing it just from me, you're hearing it from other experts. But I thought this was kind of a cool thing that came out in Time Magazine a number of years ago. So a new study in the land of the Grumps reveals that retirees with a guaranteed lifetime income stream can find true happiness. Secure at least one base level of lifetime income should be every retiree's priority, at least if they want to live happily ever after. My whole thing is retire happy. Well, in order to retire happy, you got to cover those core expenses that I talked about earlier. And the guaranteed lifetime income streams are going to help you do that. And that was an article in Time Magazine. I'm going to share some things with you later on from Kiplinger, from the Wall Street Journal, actually a couple different PhDs that weighed in on this as well. It's really cool stuff. All right, winding things down here a little bit. The phases of retirement. Here's the third sets of three. We talked about the wants, the needs, the wants, and the wishes. We talked about the different sectors of disbursements and growing your income up. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the phases of retirement, right? So I love this, the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. So the go-go years is your first part. You just retired, you have a lot of energy, you're out there, you want to do things, you're traveling, you're having fun, playing golf, playing tennis, whatever it is, you have energy, you're going to be spending a decent amount of money. That's the go-go years. Then you start morphing into the slow-go years. This is more of a passive stage of retirement. You're a little bit older. You may have the desire to do those things. You just don't feel like it anymore. Life starts slowing down a little bit. And then you get to the no-go years, which is, really more about comfort and your taking care of your health needs. Long-term care comes into that. You're not going as much. You're more sedentary. You're at home, but your healthcare costs go up. So those three phases of retirement are critical. So like I said, we talked about the needs, the wants, the wishes. We talked about we're going to talk about three different buckets of investments that you got to put your money into. That's the second set of threes, three different buckets of investments to fund your retirement distribution. And then the different phases. It's go, slow go, no gear. All three of those sets of three factor into your retirement plan, and all three need to be accounted for, but they all work together really well, right? They will all work together really well. Here's just a little bit more. And this document I'm going to post out on the Facebook group here in a little bit, so you'll be able to see it and review it. I know I'm kind of ripping through some things, but here's just a little more breakdown of the active, passive, frail, which is basically the same thing as the go, slow go, no go, right? Gives you a little bit more context of what I was talking about, right? Kind of breaks it up a little bit, but that falls right into, you may or may not have heard of the retirement smile. So you got the go, slow go, and no go. Well, the go years, you're active, you're up here doing stuff, you're having a blast. Well, that's going to cost a little bit more money, right? You're doing things. Well, you get into the slow go years, you're more at home, you're not doing as much, so your income needs are a little bit lower. But then as you get to the no go, the no go years, you got those medical expenses coming in, you got the nursing care, the health care, whatever it may be, and those medical costs start really rising. So that's what we call the retirement smile. This is your income needs throughout retirement. That's the retirement smile. So obviously your income needs across retirement is going to change. We need to account for each of those and how we fund them and how we take money out into those different phases. So that's your retirement smile. All that said, all these different things up there all lead to a happy retirement, right? So guys, I want you to be happy with your retirement. I don't want anybody to be stressed out. Let me stop the screen here real quick. I don't want you guys to be stressed out. This may seem like a lot. I hope this explained what some of the core principles of financial planning for retirement is all about. I'm also in one session later on, we're going to talk about what else is there about to retire happy, to make you retire happy versus just money and the financial side of it. There's a lot of things that factor into that as well, from a psychological standpoint, family standpoint, other things that factor in to have a happy retirement. That kind of goes into more retirement coaching that I like to bring into that as well. Holistic planning, what's going to make you happy, overall retirement. It's just not money. There's other things too as well, obviously, and we want to touch on that. So I hope that gives you a good idea of what all those different factors are. We're going to dive into each of those as we go through this series, the rest of the series on retirement side. We're going to break this up a little bit into different segments. I realize this session went a little bit long. We'll break these sessions up. Hopefully this gives you a fantastic idea. This is a great core explanation of the different factors for retirement, and they all need to be accounted for, but they all work together. That's all part of a great holistic plan to get you to retire happy. So guys, let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to post my calendar link in the chat here when I post this. Once I post the replay, I'm going to post my calendar link in there. If you just have some questions, feel free to schedule an appointment with me, or just DM me or send me an email, whatever it may be. Happy to answer your questions. I know this is a lot of information. And then also remember that these are also posted out on my YouTube page. I also post other miscellaneous content that's out there, little short snippets of YouTube shorts, in addition to what I'm sharing out here. So I hope this made sense. I hope this resonated with you. I hope that you now have a sense of what it would require to build the proper plan today for tomorrow, so you can retire happy. I am excited about sharing the rest of this with you guys and diving into each of them, and hope to be able to have you well on the path to retire happy. So have a great evening. Let me know if you have any questions. This will be posted on YouTube as well as a Facebook page, and I'll post the document soon, guys. Take care. Y'all have a great night. Talk next week.